engaging and informative day, and we look forward to some very fruitful discussions going forward. We are starting with a deep dive session part one, which is centering on Target 2030, driving net zero acceleration, scaling renewables, responsible production, and circular economy. This is to be moderated by Mr. Jsw Phelan, who's Director WBCSD India, and he's joined by a very eminent panel for taking this discussion forward. We welcome Nilesh Kumar Saha, Joint Secretary Climate Change, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. We also welcome Vaishali Sinha, Renew Foundation Chair, Chief Sustainability Officer at Renew Power. We also have with us Ashwini Saxena, CEO, JSW Foundation, Dr. Lavneesh Chanana, Head of Government Affairs at SAP for the Asia Pacific and Japan region. We also have Sandeep Singh, Managing Director, Strategy and Sustainability at Accenture. We again welcome all the eminent panelists, and I hand over the stage now to Mr. Jsw to take this deep dive session forward.
Thank you very much. So good morning to everyone. My name is Jsw Phelan. I lead the engagement of Indian companies with my organization, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And it's an honor to be part of this 16th National Convention of the United Nations Global Compact Network in India, and also to be sharing this virtual stage with our panel. I'm also, on behalf of the Global Compact, delighted to all of you who've joined online. Because of the numbers today, we won't be able to take individual questions, but we have organized to do a couple of polls so that we can gauge your opinion on this subject. And this subject is about driving net zero acceleration, particularly scaling renewables, responsible production, looking at responsible consumption, and also the circular economy. So over the next 60 minutes, we'll come to you, the audience, twice, near the start where we'll poll you and towards the end where we'll poll you. So please be ready to vote on the questions that we put to you. So as I said, my name is, we'll do the poll in just a minute. Let me first remind everyone that as we look at the theme of Target 2030, assess, act and accelerate, and also the concept of net zero, which is a longer time frame. India made some important announcements at COP26. The Prime Minister of India announced what he called Panch Amrit on the first day, which were 1, achieving net zero by 2070, 2, reducing total projected carbon emissions by 1 billion tons from now until 2030, 3, reducing the carbon intensity of India's GDP by 45% by 2030, 4, sourcing 50% of the country's electricity requirements from renewable sources by 2030, and finally increasing non-fossil fuel capacity to 500 gigawatts by 2030. These announcements were a surprise for most of us, but they, the response broadly was that they were seen as both pragmatic and bold, and also there's a consensus that the short-term targets, 2030, are extremely important and will require a lot of coordination and effort. We've seen that action on climate change is more urgent than ever. So if I could now ask the audience to have a look at this first poll, if we can put the poll up, and we'd like to gauge your views on India's net zero announcement, and then we'll have the discussion as a panel. So if my technical colleagues could put the poll up, there's a question on net zero, India's net zero target. So, we would like you to vote on one of these. And I think if you go to the chat, you may see the link through which you can vote. So, please consider which one step is going to be most important for India to achieve its net zero target. Is it about creating domestic manufacturing of clean technology solutions? Is it about market reforms of the power system? Is it access to international finance? Is it the technology transfer piece? Or is it the implementation of a carbon market that's robust and equitable? So I hope that you, the audience, are able to access a link to this, and we'll take, I think another 15 or 20 seconds, and I hope that these results coming in. And when our technical team has these responses, we'll share them with you. And it's really good for us, all of us, to understand, what people are seeing as important. So thank you to the technical team. You can see here, you can join at slido.com. You may be able to grab the QR code here. And, please do vote on this, because the targets are set. The key thing is how we achieve them. And that takes all of civil society, the finance sector, business, it takes academia and NGOs, it takes us as citizens to do it. So it's important that we all understand what each of us thinks is the most important step. And you can see in the chat, there's a link here that you can use. So please click on that link, and then we can gauge your opinion. So I think we're going to just keep that up for a little bit longer. And then our technical team will share the findings when they receive them. So thank you for that. Okay, so some results are coming in. I'm not sure. Yes, it is still active, so you can still vote. So please do that. It's great to see these results coming in. So anyone who's in the manufacture of battery storage, clean hydrogen, solar panels, electric vehicles, will be pleased with the top response. Also, that's putting the responsibility. One of the things I think there's this dynamic between how much can be done in India itself by India, and and how much it's about relying on international cooperation, which is not consistent. So the steps that can be taken by India itself. Okay, fine. So just a few seconds more. Okay, fine. So we've got a direction. It's helpful to get a steer.
Can I come in and make one comment?
Sure.
Perhaps
Sure.
you should have included another option, which is leadership intent. I think that's super critical in policy and private sector. Please continue.
Thank you. That's a great point, Vaishali. So thank you to the audience for participating in that. And now let's jump in. Mr. Nilesh Kumar Sar, we're honoured to have you as a member of this panel. You're the Joint Secretary for Climate Change at Moefcc. India made this commitment at COP26. It's the direction and intent is clear. It's being matched by leaders, of companies like Renew Power. How is the government going to design and strengthen policies to achieve this net zero target? Sorry, sir, you're just on mute just now.
Thank you, Joe, and very good morning to all of you, my panelists, and also the participants here in this webinar. As you have already mentioned, that Honorable Prime Minister announced the Panchamrit during the COP26, and you started with the announcement of net zero in 2070, and that was the last item in what the Prime Minister had mentioned. But rightly so, when you talk about net zero 2070, and then there are intermediate steps, one could take the other announcements as intermediate steps to reach those that target of 2070. The poll that you just done, in fact, you identified 5, you could say, important steps which could be undertaken or which could be important for our country to achieve the net zero by 2070. And to that was added by Ms. Vaishali here, the leadership intent. That, I would say, means there could be more points to that, more steps to that. And it's not about only one aspect of the economy which kind of needs to really clear up to achieve this target. As you would know, all the panelists would know, that our commitments under the NDC are not sector specific. That is economy wide. When we talk of emission intensity, it is emission intensity of the GDP. So basically, we are supposed to look at a comprehensive approach to achieve this net zero. Definitely, it has various pillars, various, you could say, targeted approach, which needs to be done at every level, which some of them you have identified here. And we know that the net zero is going to be achieved through reduction of emission of GHG gases. And then we need to really, as a problem-solving approach, we need to identify which are these sectors where we could make that change. And also about various technologies which need to be brought in. A lot has already been done. You are aware of that. We all are aware of that. India has achieved almost more than 40% in the RE capacity by now. This was the target till 2030 for us. So we have achieved this target already by now. And Honorable Prime Minister has increased that target. Initially, did it to 450, and now it is 500 gigawatts. So definitely the respective ministries which are there, especially steered by Ministry of Power and MNRE, they will be taking it forward to ensure that we achieve it. And and the other was about the emission intensity. Emission intensity also, we have been able to achieve substantially in that arena. Our target was till 2020 under the INDC, that is the intended NDCs, of around 25% by 2020. And we achieved around 24% of emission intensity reduction by 2016 itself. So we are well on target, and we think that we should be able to, in fact, we will be able to achieve much more than that by 2030. And rightly so, the Prime Minister has, in fact, enhanced our ambition to 45% of emission intensity reduction. So we are on track. This also signifies that even though we are having our development, it's not kind of leading to increase in emission intensity. So this is one of the important aspects which, while we are here with so many industry leaders, that through our own steps that every individual needs to take, we should be able to kind of decouple the growth, the development growth, which is so essential for our country, from the emission. So this is the kind of approach. And in the end, let me talk about one aspect which has not come out here in our discussion. Prime Minister mentioned about something very important called lifestyle for environment, life, which is also, you could kind of, if you take it forward and relate to, could be linked to SDG 12, that is the sustainable consumption and production, and say RE and C, etc., renewable resource efficiency and circular economy, these aspects would tend to be. So when we are looking at trying to achieve that net zero, it's a 50-year target. So we can't say that there is a very, very specific kind of input which is ready, or an approach which is ready for 2070. But we need to take intermediate steps. For 2030, the target is already there by the government, by the Prime Minister. It has been given to us, and we need to achieve that. So I would rather say, as of now, this is what will be our approach. Focus is definitely on RE, and also on RE. When I say RE, that's renewable energy. Then the focus is also, when the Prime Minister mentioned about having the circular economy from the ramparts of Red Fort this year. So we are working. There is a lot of consultation which has already gone in to come up with renewable energy, resource efficiency and circular economy policy. So that itself is also in the offing. So these steps that are going to be put in place should be kind of us as a country to move forward towards achieving this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And this important point about lifestyle, and how we as citizens, consumers, can play our role. Something was developed called the Good Life Goals. It was developed by businesses in partnership with the UN system, and others. And it translates the SDGs into some very straightforward talking points that can be used with school children, with tie into your corporate outreach and your marketing, just very strong, simple messages about making the SDGs personal. So I encourage everyone, to Google the Good Life Goals to help you there. You mentioned the circular economy, and we'll come onto that in a minute. Excuse me. But there was a strong focus in your remarks on renewable energy. So Masina, if I could come to you, India has done very well in achieving its renewable energy deployment targets, but now these 2030 targets require addition of maybe more than 300 gigawatts of renewable energy. I think it's a quadrupling of the deployment, the annual deployment that we've already seen, which has been a big success. It's very ambitious. What are the policies and the regulations that are going to help companies like yours to meet this challenge of really dramatic scale up?
Yeah, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Gcni, for organizing this, very, very engaging session. I think these sessions are a big contributor to, building shared sort of goals and perspectives and learning from each other. Let me come to your question, Joe. I mean, the first thing is that we have a maestro, as you have in an opera, in our Prime Minister, who is really leading and, sort of catapulting our commitment towards the 2030 goals. It's just fabulous to see, not only in India, but also in the global stage, the kind of leadership India has taken. And that really is super critical for companies like us to dream big and to dream bigger, because to meet these 300 plus gigawatts of additional targets, we really need to be on a journey which is which is injected with steroids. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get to our goals. And, over the last 10 years, if you see, Renew Power started this business at a time when nobody even understood the full form of an IPP, right? Nobody thought that this business model was viable. And so what we did at that time was engage, first having conviction, having intent, and then working with various stakeholders like the government, funders, international community, also on the ground with community, and making everybody work together. We have to become our little maestros to be able to conduct a good localized opera in our respective geographies. So I think, just simply put, just being able to, execute and do things and engage with the government, not only for yourself, but for developing the entire ecosystem and the market. I think that is the commitment Renew Power has always had with respect to ensuring that implementation in this sector and interest in this sector is sustainable. And we couldn't have done it without the support and the engagement with policy. So, Mr. Shah, I really can't compliment MNRE, because we've been engaging with MNRE for the last 10 years. The kind of, all years approach and engagement we've seen to be able to do better for the sector at our national level has been very encouraging for private sector players like us. I wish I could say the same at the subnational level, but I'm not sure if I can say that with the same amount of conviction. And I do really hope that as we march ahead, we can have this consistency of commitment at the national and subnational level, because that is very important for the entire community, the entire ecosystem, to be able to feel secure and committed in this very important area, which is going to help us meet our 2030 goals. So without any doubt that working with policymakers in an effective way is a big contribution we in the private sector can make, whether it is taking points from our experiences on the ground, or whether taking to the policymakers learnings of our interactions from global IPP players and learnings in different parts of the world. It's all huge amount of value added. We try and do it in different ways, and hopefully that helps us, take our thinking in the sector forward. And an enabling infrastructure and ecosystem is another very important driver. So I think what we have to do is communicate to policymakers, but then also have this sort of, working in tandem to make sure we make execution on the ground like a proof of concept, proof of the pudding has to be presented by us. And I think that's what Renew Power has done, whether it is on let me take an example. During COVID, we saw, there was a, sort of disproportionate reliance on the supply chain from a certain geography. And it was really heartening to see that the government came up with schemes and incentives for us to build our own country's Atmanirbharta. And if companies like us step it up and make that a possibility and show that we can do it, I think then we work well together and we can take things forward. We can then scale it up. And so those are different ways in which we can work together with the government. Of course, I think another important area is just contributing to other social areas, right? We mentioned lifestyle issues right now on the call. Mr. Shah mentioned, and I think that's super critical. I think skilling is very important. Look at the way the sector is going to grow. There is going to be a shift from a certain sector which is going to become redundant, and there is a certain sector which is going to be seeing a huge amount of growth of opportunities. Are we in the private sector? We can't rely on the government to do everything for us. We have to take cues and then do our bit. So I would say that I think there's an estimated 3.5 million jobs which are going to be created by, say, 2050. And each one of us on this panel can do our bit. We at Renew are working actually globally by getting industry, academia engaged, and coming up with training programs in our country at the local level, at the grassroots level. And this transformation in engaging and skilling our workforce is not going to be a fair one without engaging women. So I am super focused to ensure that at the rural and at the national level, we engage women to the extent possible. And hopefully next time we're going to be, I want to compliment you and Gcni to ensuring that we have women on panels. But things like, small things like this make a small difference. To have at least a woman or at least have 50% women on a panel, in my view, majority women on a panel, but this should then cascade down in terms of real engagement with respect to activities which are economic contributors as well. And I look forward to that. So these are some of my points. I don't want to take too much time. I think I must have taken more than my time allocated to me, but thanks, Joe, back to you.
Thank you. Great input. So building on your point about leadership conviction, emphasizing the collaborations that you've needed to create, a lot of emphasis on building the ecosystem that that can support growth of, in your case, renewable energy, emphasizing the importance of a just transition and skilling, and in that the importance of female empowerment and employability. I think the G20, which India plays a big role in, is going to be in Indonesia next year and will be hosted by India in 2023. And we understand that gender is going to be a very strong theme of that. And so there's some opportunities through that process, I think, to build support for a just transition and for women's empowerment and support of the efforts that you're leading.
Joe, can I just add one more point? Sorry to interrupt.
Please.
There is a W20 there, which is very encouraging as a part of the G20. So it's great to see these, designated initiatives. I also wanted to say financing and innovation around financing is going to be super critical in this transition, and how we get the designated funds from Global North to Global South is going to be super critical as well. So innovation there, and we at Renew have innovated with respect to masala bonds and other green initiatives, innovative products as well. So that's going to be a great driver for this transition. Back to you.
Thank you. So taking these themes, Dr. Saxena, you're CEO of the Jsw Foundation, and Jsw is one of those companies which takes its responsibilities extremely seriously, has set that leadership commitment in terms of both on the climate side, but also long-term investment in communities. And when we think about the ecosystem that needs to support businesses contributing to achieving these goals, there's the infrastructure and the regulatory and the finance, but there's also the community around where you operate, the natural environment in which you're operating. So could you please tell us, how important is it to engage in these subjects, and what has JSW done to build resilience, and prosperity in the environment and the community in which you're operating?
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everyone. It's an interesting question that you posed, Joe. If we look at the the effect of social and economic inequalities on climate change and how it creates an impression on the overall strata of the society to consume, because we are talking about the basic theme of reduction in consumption and responsible production. So 5 quick points I would like to bring forward. First, there's always an asymmetry in power-weighted social decision, as they say, where the powerful tend to accrue more benefits and more harmful effects get passed on to the poor. For example, the organic foods that we all use. Then there's also a lot of segregation, which we see in our slum areas. There's a spatial asymmetry, which leads to significant environmental impacts. The third is that when you as a certain strata of the society set standards of consumption, that standard becomes the benchmark for other people to work towards that, and which again pushes unrealistic consumption patterns, which packaged foods and all those things that we are all aware of. The fourth is that the income inequalities itself, creates a barrier, for diffusion of new technologies. We all talk about, technology transfer and new technologies, but I'm sure the electric cars are still not affordable for everyone. So that's a classic example. And the unfortunate part is that as the social cohesion itself drops, there is a trust deficit between the haves and the have-nots and the policymakers and the communities. The overall cooperation and the concern for public good, that diminishes significantly, which is so apparently visible in all those areas where you go and you see the sense of apathy. And I think this has been very beautifully captured in a number of studies by Banerjee and Duflo also. So the idea is that investment in environment and investment in social and economic upliftment has to go hand in hand. It cannot be decoupled from each other. So I'll just give you one example from the work that we're trying to do. As a foundation, we do a whole range of activities. So it would be unfair for me to touch upon all of them. But I'll just bring one classical example, how climate change and investment in social and economic issues is concerned. So we do work a lot of things around mangrove restoration, because the sequestration potential, carbon sequestration potential of mangroves is very significant. It's I think the technical people say it's more than 2.5 times than any other thing that you do for carbon sequestration. Now the idea is that you're doing it for an environmental purpose, but will that be sufficient enough? Because the 3-4 points that I raised before. It can be done without involving local communities. You can do it without creating any livelihood opportunity. But the fact is that when you do such kind of an environmental restoration project, what happens is that the local communities get engaged. Over a period of time, their own awareness about why this particular component of the ecosystem is important for their biodiversity, for their livelihoods, for their long-term sustenance of the environment around them, that gets implanted in a subtle manner. And as so the model that we follow is that mangrove restoration is not relegated to an NGO which is going to just go and do the plantation for us. It's a whole process of engaging the local communities, especially the women self-help groups, because I think Vaishali touched upon women. So empowering the women self-help groups, building their capacities, and making them learn from environmental experts how to go about it, and do the transplantation of those saplings so that the barren patches can be covered through mangroves. Now, the whole process actually not just creates livelihoods, it's also bringing a concern and appreciation for this important ecosystem. And therefore, when this is done along with the company volunteers doing this, mangrove plantation across, in last 4 to 5 years, I think we've done about 15 lakh sapling transplantation in one location. And the success rate is not less than 94%. So that automatically tells you that you're trying to overcome the natural degradation process by involving the communities around, and therefore they also become more aware of how they can protect their environment. And I think that becomes a very strong piece. And again, as I mentioned about the social capital component, the trust deficit component, the fact that the company volunteers are working along with them, at a low tide in, knee-deep waters and muddy waters to, do the sapling transplantation, it creates that community company connect in a very strong manner, in a very sustained manner. And I think these kind of examples, if they can be replicated in all kinds of works that we do, it tackles livelihood or poverty alleviation issues. It's also tackling the I would say the trust deficit issues, and at the end of the day, it's also substantially contributing towards the positive efforts towards climate change. So I think, to me, this is just one example that I thought I should share with you. There could be a number of such examples. The lens is how you can create trust connect, how you can create a livelihood opportunity around that, because that binds people very strongly to the cause. And third, how do you set the objectives so that the understanding, the common understanding, and the joint action can be taken care of. I'll stop at that.
Thank you very much. And it's a really important point about the asymmetry. So we've had a lens for India's development about meeting minimum needs, but as the country's developed, it's become more and more important, the gap between the rich and the poor. So it's no longer about just meeting basic needs, but the asymmetry, to use your word, is causing challenges. And also a strong part of your message, the importance of a holistic approach, combining efforts, climate action and nature action, but with equity action, building livelihoods in there, and the trust and that very strong capacity building, that very strong human element to what you're doing. So thank you for that. I think I'd be really interested to hear Dr. Chinana, your head of government affairs at SAP for the Asia Pacific and Japan region. We heard there a very people-centered, human interaction-centered approach to more sustainable production and consumption. What kind of digital technology-based solutions can companies like yours bring for cleaner, more sustainable production and consumption? For example, like digitization across the power grid. Please let us know what solutions are out there.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. And again, thanks to the Gcni for bringing up such relevant issues on this convention. So, from a technology standpoint, Joe, if I can answer your question, largely sustainability remains a resource issue. That is the management of resources. The support to that would lead to the sustainability answers that we are looking at. And we feel that the best way is to embed these sustainability related metrics into the business processes itself. Once we have done that, the answers to many questions that we are actually trying to achieve are automatically available. Now, and that's one part from a technology standpoint. The other dimension to the technology application, we have so far so well focused on ensuring that the companies using technology solutions get their top line, bottom line information, as well as they manage it well. I think that the third dimension of the green line now is actually becoming all the more important, and that's where the technology solution shift will need to happen. And as technology companies, therefore, there are two roles that we are supposed to play. One, obviously, is of an exemplar. That is to show to the world that digitally this can be actually achieved. Say, for example, as SAP, we announced net zero by 2023, initially 2025, advanced it to this, to show that green IT is also the way. And second role that we play is as an enabler. That is, we actually enable. Take, for example, in India, we are serving more than 14,000 companies in India, and we did a study. The top 25 to top 250 customers for us, the large companies or a mix of all kinds of companies, contribute to nearly 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions. So there is a responsibility that from a technology perspective that we have. The idea that we are actually playing with is to use technology for what we call it as zero emissions, zero waste, and zero inequality. Now, so that's the approach that we have when it comes to the technology solutions. Obviously, all of us understands the role of technology, whether it's the emerging technologies of IoT to improve energy efficiency by real-time sensors and by real-time data collection at sources. Examples like AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to actually reinvent recyclable packaging materials that we can do. Blockchain for end-to-end traceability to ensure that we have the traceability along this, and analytics. And India, we did a very interesting thing, Joe, and I think that is important to mention here. It's not only at the company level, the approach that of competitive federalism in terms of the SDG index that we created, and now we are going to the district level. There is a huge role, and the data that we are generating in this collection process, there is a huge role of analytics at the national level also in terms of identifying where all we can do that. So that is the overall approach and what technology can do. Coming to our solutions, Joe, we have obviously adopted a complete holistic approach. Our solutions cover the responsible design and productions. That's the EPR covering. The product compliance to the EHS is another one. Most important for this panel and for this section is the business network solutions. Now, the business network solutions, that is because sustainability per se is not one organization's responsibility. It's a collective responsibility. So we run the world's largest business networks, wherein the suppliers and their customers connect, and that provides the digital pipeline and digital connectivity for embedding the carbon data, emission data from the raw material manufacturer across to the end supplier, and that's the supply chain traceability that is available through the business networks. Obviously, our traditional, and we have now come out with the product footprint management to understand the carbon footprint at each stage of the business process. Then our traditional solutions around asset management with the idea of improving the efficiency and exploring opportunities. So that's the kind of solution offering that doing. Now it's not only the solution offering that I want to talk about. What is the way forward in terms of innovating these solutions? And that's where the whole digital entrepreneurship in this area. Example, we have two very good startups being supported by us. One is Everloop by SAP, which is connecting the e-waste producers to the e-waste recyclers and bringing in transparency as to what is that I am trying to do. Similarly, we are supporting another startup. This is an in-house green token, which actually ensures that it can trace back that the product you are sourcing is actually sustainable. So through and there's a demand these days from the customers, from the millennials, from everybody, that whatever I'm buying is sustainable. So these kinds of huge segment in terms of holistic, and to add to this, realizing fully that these digital solutions will not be sufficient as a standalone thing. We are also working on the skilling in technology space with governments, with our partners like Danikali of Tech Mahindra or with Amul. We are working to ensure that there is a digital talent pool. Second, there is a digital acceptability, and COVID supported to some extent in terms of establishing the what's in it for me, but on ground acceptability of these digital solutions from a common citizen perspective. So that's the holistic technology centric approach that, Joe, we have adopted, and I thought I'll share with you. Happy to answer any questions, but back to you.
Thank you very much. And this first point you made about building these sustainability metrics straight into the business processes and alongside the other metrics that are captured in normal business operations. The traceability element with suppliers, and also building the connect with government down to a district level, so that they're using the same digital ecosystem to track SDG performance. So creating a whole digital ecosystem. Thank you, and it's great to see how fast this space is developing, bringing in transparency across supply chains. You mentioned about e-waste, and earlier we heard from Mr. Shah at Moefcc about circular economy and the remarks that the Prime Minister made at the Red Fort earlier this year. I'd like to turn to Mr. Sundeep Singh, your Managing Director for Strategy and Sustainability at Accenture. Building on this point, how is India gearing up for greater resource efficiency and circular economy? What policies are important? And we've heard the phrase, but what's going to really drive the circular economy in India?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for that. And thanks also to you and Gcni for organizing this interesting debate. Now, if I were to think about circular economy, I know Mr. Shah talked about the importance of renewable energy and resource efficiency when it comes to really delivering on our commitments that we have recently made with respect to climate change. Now, on circular economy, let me just take a step back and talk about what exactly is the size of the prize that we are talking about. And then let me turn our attention to what it takes to be really able to achieve that. Now, globally, we did some study and we found that there is almost $4.5 trillion worth of value which can be realized by 2030 through circular economy interventions. And this is a global number. If we translate that to India, our research shows that it's going to be about $500 billion worth of value that can be recovered through circular business models by 2030. Now, when it comes to circular economy, there are two interesting trends that we are observing of late. The first one is that the linkage between decarbonization and circular economy is becoming more explicit. While traditionally the two things may have been thought of as separate, circular economy was all about resource efficiency, waste management, innovation, and those kind of things. And climate change was more about emissions and curbing the emissions through net zero or renewable energy and those kind of things. But the linkage between the two is becoming more explicit. In fact, we did a recent study wherein we found that for some of the hard to abate sectors, let's say sectors like steel and cement, almost 50 to 60% of the emissions which are required to be curbed by 2030 could actually come through circular economy interventions, through resource efficiency interventions. And that's the kind of linkage that we're talking about. The other big thing that we have seen with respect to circular economy is that the shift is now beginning to take place from just the downstream focus to more end-to-end value chain focus. So again, a few years back, a lot of what we talked about circular economy was somewhat focused on waste management, somewhat focused on take-back programs and minimizing the plastic waste and those kind of priorities. But it's now that we're also talking about things like circular design, things like manufacturing excellence, things like product as a service, product life extension, business model innovation. So what traditionally may have been very downstream focused is now very clearly becoming end-to-end, starting all the way from sourcing and design and the way products are manufactured in the first place. Now, that said, that just kind of lays the context with respect to what's the size of the prize or what's the value that one can realize from circular economy, given the holistic nature, the end-to-end value chain approach, which is fast becoming quite popular. But now, where are we with respect to execution? You talked about what would it take for India to really deliver on those, what kind of policies and what kind of actions are required. I think here again, there is an important point to be observed. We did a CEO study recently wherein we asked about 1,000 plus CEOs across the globe. How explicit is the linkage between circular business models, sustainability with respect to business value? Almost 97% of the CEOs told us that they very clearly recognize the linkage. But now if we translate that to what we see in the Indian context, if we look at the top 100 companies by market capitalization, what we see is that there are only 25% companies which have still announced their net zero targets. There is still 3 in 4 companies which are yet to announce their net zero targets. So kind of alludes to the gap that Vaishali talked about at the beginning, that the leadership intent needs to be there as well. While there is awareness, there is acknowledgement, but has it sufficiently translated into action? Probably there is a bit of catching up to do. Similarly, only 27% of the top 100 companies in India currently have announced their circular economy targets. So that kind of again talks about, a kind of a gap with respect to recognition and execution. While CEOs and leaders are recognizing the importance of circular economy as a source of value creation, that necessarily hasn't translated into action yet, which is the opportunity for us. And yes, what would it take for us to be able to bridge that gap? I think policy has to play an important role. Joe, you talked about policies. There are a lot of such things which are coming up. You think about things like extended producer responsibilities, which have been announced. Think about circular economy guidelines. Those are the kind of things which are going to really expedite the adoption of circular business models, the actual actioning of resource efficiency initiatives, which is the need of the hour from India perspective. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Joe, for any questions.
Thank you very much. It's great to get the kind of, the truth test to look at how the targets set by the country or are being matched by targets set by businesses, and also, where businesses here in India stand in relation to global averages. I think that the net zero target set by India, I think, shows some of the context for some sectors of India, and now that target's been set, I hope that a lot more companies will come forward with their own targets. So I think also, very important, this point about now coming through the whole system. So where there was a big focus before on recycling and valuing waste, but this point you make, Mr. Singh, about end to end, upstream in the product design, and all the way through. It's really important. It's great to see that coming. We have about 15 minutes left, and we want to do another poll. So what I'm going to ask is I'm going to do another round of questions and ask that you just keep to just 1 minute in your reply if you can. And then if we have time at the end left over, there's a couple of questions that have come through that we'll try to get to. So my request is to keep as brief as you can. Mr. Saar, we were very honored to have him. He's had to join another meeting. So Vaishali Sinha, I'll come back to you. I know that you're taking part in energy storage tenders at Renew as part of your Renewable Power Edition. What policies can help you and companies like you to accelerate additional, more firm power for renewable energy that can help meet the needs of industry for clean energy 24/7? What can help you do that?
Yeah, hi, Joe. Given I took slightly longer time in my first question, I'll try and keep it below 1 minute here. So, of course, to understand what policies are required, we need to really understand what are the challenges we are looking at. So, what are the challenges if you look at the intermittency, around storage and the relevance of storage? I would say there is definitely a low mineral reserve situation in India. I think the industry is at a very nascent levels. There is also, like in any nascent sector, lack of coordination among stakeholders, which is very critical. There's also high risk perception for the sector because of its nascency. So it's a little bit of a vicious circle, or kind of a chicken and egg situation. Also, I think we also require systematic requirement and assessment for storage. We do require some pilots and some use cases to be able to study them, to get a sense of what is required so that the right policies can be made, and and make it more sort of the trajectory, advance the trajectory towards a more mature sector. I think PLIs would be helpful, maybe regulation supporting specific, as I said, use cases for technology. These are some of the things we need to look at. I know, I perhaps have crossed 1 minute, but back to you. Health of discoms, etc., is always crucial to try and test and get things done as well. So there's a long list actually.
Yeah.
But some for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Renew is part of a group actually with JSW and some 18 other companies. I think there's about 20 companies in all who are working together in India to build the ecosystem for accelerating adoption of energy storage. And so, for example, you're talking about risk, and that there isn't currently an insurance product that can insure investments in energy storage in India, for example. So we have insurance companies in the group working to develop these things, and this kind of ecosystem coordination, development, ecosystem development is very important. Mr. Saxena, I have two questions for you, and please pick the one that you most want to answer. So you talked about mangrove development as, something with high carbon or greenhouse gas sequestration potential. So my first question is, how often do you link these kind of climate aspects into your social investment, and what are the co-benefits with that in terms of water? My second question, and choose this one if you prefer, how do you measure what impact you have in the social dimension? Because we understand tons of CO2 and how we can reduce and how we can grow, and we understand how to measure the climate side, but measuring the social impact is much harder. And is this something that you've thought about at JSW that you could share with us? So if you'd like to answer either of those questions, that'd be very welcome.
Thanks, Joe. I'll try to answer both of them as quickly as possible within the timeline. So first of all, I think, a whole range of things are possible to, I'll answer the second question first. There are a whole range of tools which can be used for measuring this enhancement to social capital, or this social cohesion can be measured. In our approach, what we do is we look at signals, we look at, I would say, the leading indicators as to how the sense of ownership by the community has gone up, how a whole range of stakeholders are now participating in it. So convergence and joint action by the community, I think, are the two key indicators for us when we are talking about whether the message is getting loudly clear there or not. So in case of mangrove restoration, I can share a lot of anecdotal stories, but which are also captured in a data format as well, that the women self-help groups have even pawned their own resources to start getting into the projects. And there are a number of examples where pond deepening work has been taken care of by the self-help groups as a kind of their contribution to the whole process. So if these signals one can pick up from the community work, one can very easily understand that yes, the direction is set, and they are having that sense of ownership. So that's one. The second part is, which you very rightly pointed out, is that it's important for us to have a clear integration between the inside fence and the outside fence kind of activities, which Dr. Singh also, I think, talked about. It's not just about circular economy on one side and resource efficiency on the other side. It has to be coordinated very well. So JSW as a group, and I would say as a company, both steel, energy, and cement, the way they are integrated with each other is a classical example of circular economy, where JSW Cement is the only cement company in the country to use slag as the base material. So that's a classic example. Whatever cement slag is collected is turned into cement from the steel slag. Similarly, a whole lot of, I would say, heat recovery mechanisms, a whole lot of, the longest pipeline conveyor. So the idea is that iron ore, if it is being shifted from the mines to the plant for steel making, even the footprint of the supply chain needs to be looked at and should be considered. So the longest pipeline, perhaps piped conveyor in the world, to transport iron ore direct from the mines into the steel plant, so that the carbon footprint of the supply chain can also be reduced. So basically, the idea being water, a very key, I would say, material issue for steel's industry. We are perhaps one of the few companies who have taken a water footprint assessment across all our locations, using the best GIS technologies possible to assess what is the water footprint that we are generating from our business, and how we can actually, not just say neutralize it, but turn it into water positive. So a whole range of work that foundation does and the sustainability team does in tandem with each other is around reducing the water footprint or managing that water footprint within the fence and also outside the fence by a whole range of watershed development programs. I'll stop it.
Thank you. Dr. Chanana, can I build on this question that I asked Mr. Saxena about social indicators? You're building systems that companies can use to bring in data into their business processes. What indicators do you use on the social side to help companies understand the impact they're having and the positive change that they're making?
So the the use cases for companies in terms of from an operational parameters. So obviously, the basic use is you can automate, digitize the data collection for all activities to come out with whatever indicators that you decide as an organization. Example being, I can use the carbon emission data to arrive internally at the carbon pricing, carbon taxing, and embed that into my process. The other good part about technology usage is it can help you in real-time collection of data related to your disclosure requirements. For example, now in India, we have the BRSR coming up in 20. So that indicators also can come in through this data. And more importantly, I don't think the indicator visibility is a challenge, but more importantly, the way forward is the scenario planning. If I am using this logistic route, vis-a-vis this logistic route, what is the employability, what is the social thing that I'm going to improve? That scenario planning is the biggest contribution that technology can offer. And obviously, we can do collective sustainability program management. So some of these actually can facilitate the kind of indicators that we are thinking about.
Yeah, thank you. And so that's really important, not only measuring performance and supporting corporate disclosures, but also supporting corporate decision making, being able to look at the scenarios of how to build resilience, efficiency, reliability into your supply chains and support better decision making by understanding the implications of each decision on climate, on nature, as well as on equity. So thank you very, very much for that. Mr. Singh, you were talking about the general trend of adoption of circular economy by businesses. What about as consumers? Is any of that visibility that Dr. Chanana was talking about in terms of the transparency on performance? Will consumers ever be able to see which products perform best from an environmental, social governance perspective? Do you know of any examples where companies are doing that, or where policies could allow that to happen?
Absolutely. No, I think if we think from consumers' perspective, very clearly, yes, there is a need, there is a demand from the consumer side. If we look at the Indian consumer base, the research shows us that almost 30% of the Indian consumers are willing to pay a 10% premium on sustainable products. So quite clearly, that recognition to be able to pay and to be able to, select sustainable products over the traditional products is there. Now, with respect to how quickly can they see such trends, I think the way these kind of sustainable trends will manifest in the products and then eventually be visible to the consumers would vary. For example, if we think about some of the companies like FMCG companies in India, they are taking some very innovative product packaging based innovations which can allow them to be able to shift to sustainable products which are directly visible to the end consumer. For example, if we think about Nestle India, they have recently introduced a paper straws. Paper straws which has allowed them to eliminate 30 million straws, the traditional plastic straws. Now that's the kind of a product which is directly visible to the end consumer. Having said that, if you think about an automotive company typically can only influence about 5% of their overall emissions footprint by taking initiatives which are within the factory boundaries. For them to be able to impact the remaining 95% of their carbon footprint, they have to work with their suppliers, with their downstream partners, and those kind of ecosystem collaborative approaches required. Now, I think those are the kind of product innovations which probably are going to be a little more implicit. It might not necessarily be directly visible to the consumer, but clearly the push from the consumer, the shift in the desires, the shift in their expectations is going to drive that change. And through the use of technologies like blockchain and other such technologies, these product innovations will become more and more visible going forward.
Thank you. Very quickly, Mr. Saxena.
So if I can add,
just wanted to give a quick example here. When Sandeep was talking about, so one innovation that we have looked at in JSW Steel is about looking at how fuel injection can be done in electric arc furnaces, which is connected to the waste management program that the foundation does. So all the plastic which is of no use, which cannot be recycled, is actually being shredded. A 1 ton plastic is every day being co-processed in the steel blast furnace, which perhaps has been done for the first time in the country.
Yeah, fantastic. Dr. Chanana?
from it's not only the consumers that are looking for sustainable, even the investors today are looking at your performance before they invest. It has become an all-round requirement rather than one side of the business that we have there. That's what I know.
Thank you. And that transparency is there. So technical team, please can you put up our second poll? Audience, please be ready to click the link and vote. While this goes up, so here you can see the 2030 targets. What is the most important target that India should set next? We have these very ambitious targets, which we've been talking about meeting, but we understand that there's a ratchet in the commitments that each country makes. What would be most useful, perhaps, at the COP27 in Egypt later this year? Is it land-based greenhouse gas reduction and removal, things like mangroves, soil health, rice, afforestation? Should it be in electric vehicles, in hydrogen consumption, in energy storage installation, or in zero waste target? Please vote now. There should be a link for you. And we have about 45 seconds left, I think, maybe 1 minute left. So technical team, I hope you can put the link up for everyone to use so that they can vote, because we don't have much time left. While you're voting, I really want to thank all of the panelists. I really enjoyed the discussion, and I'm confident that the audience will have too. If in the remaining 30 seconds you have an answer to any of the questions in the Q&A, please post it there. But a big thank you to all of you, and also to Mr. Saar, who was needed for a meeting in Parliament, which is why he couldn't be with us to the end. And a big thank you to Gcni for organizing this session, and the technical team for enabling this poll. Zero waste target, we heard what JSW are doing on the waste front. Land-based GHG reduction, electric vehicles, very important. I think we were going to ask Mr. Saar about hydrogen. We know that the country is pushing that. So it's good to see this. So our time is up. Once again, from my heart, a big thank you to the panel, and I really enjoyed the session, and thanks to GCNI, and I'll hand back to our MC to take us through the rest of today. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, co-panelists.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. It was an excellent start to day 2 of the National Convention. It happened to be one of the very informative and real sense deep dive session on the need of the hour, and the way you conducted the polls. Amazing, very engaging session, and also very interesting discussion on circular economy that presents a huge opportunity to India right now. I thank the esteemed panel for sharing their amazing thoughts with us, and thank you once again, Joe, for steering the session so well. So from one deep dive session, let's